Welcome to the Manifest Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Norma Reyes, a Latina career and life coach. With this podcast, I help successful women learn how to combine their intuition and logic so that they can manifest their dream career. By listening to my podcast, you'll learn how to go from feeling stuck and lost on what to do next to having the clarity, motivation, and strategies to manifest the career of your dreams. Each episode, I'll teach you the skills, strategies, and mindset you need, girl, to get in alignment with your career goals. Now let's go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, welcome back. This is episode 24, and today's guest is Jacquelinnes Mejia. She is the CEO and founder of My Resume Squad, a career services company specializing in resume reviews, career and interview coaching, as well as learning how to optimize your LinkedIn profile. She is a proud graduate of the University of Missouri, renowned School of Journalism, and also received her minor in business. Many of her clients are first-gen professionals in the workforce, just like you and me, as well as her. Jacquelinne is so passionate about helping creating an easy-to-navigate career roadmap for her clients. Jacquelinne has also worked as a journalist and social media producer for national news organizations, including Univision, NBC Los Angeles, We Are Me Too, and Bessie, or Bessie? I don't know. Please forgive me on that one. She continues to freelance as an entertainment journalist for the Urban Hollywood 411.com and social media producer for Hits 92.3 radio station in Atlanta. Jacquelinne also received professional training as a career counselor at the University of Missouri. I'm so happy to have her here. Well, thank you for being here with us. Now, can you tell us about your family background? Where did you grow up and who did you live with?
Sure. So my family background is I have a mom from Mexico and my dad is from El Salvador. And so my brother and I grew up with them, throughout our whole lives. And my grandparents would also kind of switch off when we were young. My grandma and grandpa from Mexico, they would spend about half the year here and then the other half of the year in Mexico. So it was definitely a multi-generational household growing up with my Mama Lupe and Papa Poli that would live with us at home for about half the year. And I'd say that pretty much happened maybe almost till throughout high school until unfortunately my grandma died, but she was a huge influence in my life and why I'm doing what I'm doing now. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like fun to have her there for you. So when you were young and people asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, what do you recall telling them?
Yeah. So in terms of people asking me when I was young, what do you want to be when you grow up? I clearly remember having kind of three phases, in my answer, where when I was really young, probably from 5 to 6 around there, I would tell people I'd like to be a doctor or ER doctor because I loved this show back then called 911, where it was real life emergency calls and how doctors and EMTs would have to solve that. But then around 6, I was like, ooh, that's a lot of blood and, stuff I would have to deal with. So that kind of dream of a doctor died out. And then when I was, probably around elementary school, I definitely told people I would love to go to the Olympics because I was a competitive figure skater for 10 years when I was a kid. So definitely, wanting to go to the Olympics was, in there in my answers. And then throughout that whole time, after I was okay, don't want to be a doctor, I always told people I wanted to be a writer. So writer and, an Olympic athlete were there until I was maybe, 10 to 12. And then around 12, I decided I wanted to be a journalist. So around that time, that was when September 11th happened, very formative experience for me at that time in middle school. And I was okay, I can see how the power of journalism helped people to understand what was going on in that time. And so from then on, I was like, okay, I want to be, a journalist and either writing or doing something in multimedia.
Wow. That's I love that. I love the different roles and everything. I think I was pretty I don't know. I don't think I had such clear ideas at that young. I think it wasn't until much later, about 10, that I was like, I want to be a judge. And then I forgot all about that. And I still think like, man, I wish I could be a judge. But anyway.
Yeah, I feel like most kids, don't have like a super clear idea, which I think that's absolutely normal. Like to think, oh, I think I want to do this. I think I want to do that. I feel like I've kind of, in a way, even my friends now, we joke about it. Like I've always been a little bit type A, even when I was like a kid. And so even at like 5 or 6, I would like make lists, make like 5-year goal lists, like what I want to be when I was 25. I love even now making lists. And so I think my type A was already on display back then.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. I don't know any 5-year-old. My son is 5. I can't imagine him doing goals yet. So, who do you recall as some of your earliest career role models, those that you imagine being like, and what kind of work did they do?
Yeah, so I think this question, it's great because there's so many layers of it. So number one, like I always looked up to my parents. They came here as two teens, coming from different countries, didn't know the language, and they worked really hard and worked their way up and started their own businesses. So I always looked up to my parents because to me, they really were the embodiment of like, if you work hard, you can attain success. So they were definitely very early on career models. And then I also looked up to Peter Jennings and Jorge Ramos. So they were anchors. Peter Jennings was an anchor for ABC World News Tonight, and then Jorge Ramos for Univision. And I watched both of them growing up and just really admired how calm they were delivering the news, especially Peter Jennings, when he literally did not take a break for like 36 hours when September 11th happened. And so those kind of, I guess, 4 people are early career role models. And then, as I mentioned before, I was a competitive figure skater. So in terms of the athletic side, I always looked up to Tara Lipinski and Mia Hamm because I felt like they opened up doors for female athletes, especially Mia Hamm in soccer. And so definitely like instilled in me, about equality in women's sports and doing what you love and what you can do, and you can do it just as well as, a male can. So those are all career role models I'd say I had growing up.
Thank you. You're so clear again. I'm like, man, I wish I had. I mean, there was people but I think for me, it's like kind of like passing for me, like the moments in time, but I don't clearly like have names I could just pull out. But so now please tell us about your educational background. Did you attend college right after high school?
Yeah. So I think, growing up definitely was instilled in me to go to college. For me, it wasn't a question. Like it was more of, where I was going to go to college. And I actually decided to attend an out of state university. So as I said, I knew I wanted to be a journalist, and that was like a huge guiding point for me in college. And throughout, some serendipitous meetings with people and events, I learned about the University of Missouri and that it was one of the top undergraduate schools for journalism. My family and I went to go visit it when I was a junior in college, and we just absolutely fell in love with the school, the atmosphere. The school spirit is very different than anything you'd find here in California. I'm from California, so, very different. We're not like a huge football state here, but in the Midwest, it's big to do sports. And so just with the school spirit, we really fell in love with it. And then on top of that, it's a world-renowned journalism school. And so it all just kind of came together. And I clearly remember, making the decision to go there. And of course, it was scary because I'm a first generation student, first person in my family to go to college. Not only that, but then going to an out of state college, like literally halfway across the country, didn't know anybody. So that definitely was a culture shock. And I will never forget going with my dad to summer orientation at the University of Missouri, or Mizzou for short. And I never will forget, we were, kind of taking a break in between one of the college orientation sessions. My dad and I went to go get Cold Stone ice cream. And he's like, "So, how are you feeling? Are you excited?" And I was like, I've never seen so many like blonde haired, blue eyed people in my life. It was definitely a culture shock because, coming from California, you hear the word minority, or you had to check the box of minority, or that you're, Latino, Latina, on like applications and things like that. But I never grasped the word minority. I didn't feel like one. And I remember talking to my dad, and I was like, I didn't really feel like a minority until I came here and I understood the root of the word, that like there aren't people that looks like you. So that was definitely a big culture shock for me. But I also feel like it was an extremely formative experience, and like, I think why I'm open to so many things and have from that point on like taken so many risks, because I learned how to go somewhere where you don't know anybody and like really rely on, what are those little networks that you can make. So I remember my dad and I went through the new student program like list of clubs on campus. And my dad was like, there's a Hispanic American Leadership Organization. That's what it was called at the time, HALO for short. And so he's like, you should, look into that club and see, maybe people there can become your friends. And so I did, and I went to the orientation for Latino students on campus. And I loved the people that I met at Halo. All the upperclassmen, they were from all over the country, from Chicago, from, Cubans from Miami, just all over the place. And it really felt like a home away from home on this campus. They taught me like about campus and which professors were the good ones to get, like which lecture halls to go to. They even went shopping with me when my first winter came around and I had no idea what like snow gear to get. So, things like that really made a difference. And I happened to run into a few of the upperclassmen members from Halo on my first day on campus. And they like literally walked me to class, and it was just such a breath of fresh air, like making a community specifically of Latinos and Latinas in a campus where you are less than 3% of the population. And so to have that club kind of be my guiding post throughout those 4 years, like they gave me the confidence to then, apply to jobs on campus and become part of all these organizations that I was a part of on campus. It all really stemmed from this experience that I had at Halo. And that's what really helped me feel part of the university community when I first got to Mizzou.
That's awesome. And a great reminder for everyone that is in college, if they're an undergrad or even if they're not, to seek those out. Because if you don't, I know for myself, I knew they existed, but I didn't seek them out. I figured I'd be okay, but I probably didn't feel like I had a Latino community in school until about 2 years later. My first 2 years, I definitely felt a lot more isolated. And while I only went to school an hour north of San Antonio, it still was a culture shock for me. And I still had that same thing where I was like, well, I am a minority. And it just makes you feel, I don't want to say small. I've kind of felt like I stood out like a sore thumb kind of thing, like I don't belong here. And so I'm glad that you found your supports very early. And it does make a big difference. Had I found my supports earlier, I would have had a different experience. Not that it was bad, but maybe I would have been a little more of a risk taker too.
Yeah,
So,
I was going to say, I absolutely agree with you about, if you can, if, for any listeners going to college, I always tell people try to find at least one club that you want to explore. And like that will make the university feel so much, in a way smaller, like a community, So, like I said, I was the first one to go to college in my family and also out of kind of my group of friends, and, kind of led the way for my younger brother too. So, through everything, I always tell everyone, told my brother, like, find at least one club on campus. And so I feel like that's, a piece of advice that I often give incoming college students, because it really can make a difference.
yeah, it definitely can. So, before starting your first full time job, what were some of your career interests then?
Yeah. So during my time in college, I definitely got to explore a lot of things. So I was a journalism major and also business minor because I always knew, I was going to go in media. And then I also knew at some point in my life, I always wanted to start my own business. So to kind of balance both of those, I decided to be a business minor and, learn accounting, learn like what overhead costs are, things like that. So those were definitely my career interests, media, and then also business. And I also worked at the Career Center during college from freshman year to senior year. And we had to be trained for close to a year. We were trained my freshman year on how to review resumes and, things like that. So, was balancing a lot of things while being a student. I was reporting for various news outlets, including being a startup intern at what is now Newsy, which is a TV channel. And so it was really cool to literally be one of the first people that helped build that company to what it is now. And then I also worked at the NPR affiliate on campus. I was reporting business news throughout mid-Missouri and, working as an actual journalist while I was a full-time student. So you had to work at least 20 to 25 hours a week as an actual journalist for actual outlets. Like I said, NPR, Newsy. I also worked for the local affiliate station in St. Louis. So that was part of what's known as a Missouri method at the University of Missouri is you're a full-time student and you're expected to also work as a pretty much part-time journalist, in actual news stations across the country. So balancing that while also, doing coursework and then working at the Career Center. So those were all kind of different career things that I did, I guess, before my first full-time job. And then one of also the big internships that I got prior to my senior year, so the summer going into my senior year of college, I landed an internship that summer at what was back then known as Tu Ciudad magazine. It was a magazine based in Los Angeles, part of like the Los Angeles Magazine Group. And I interned there for about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, not the full summer, because unfortunately that summer the publication decided to shut down Tu Ciudad and like laid off its staff and stuff. So unfortunately, that was my first experience with like learning what a layoff is and things like that. But, I was an intern. But during that time, I got to go to this cool like building where this glossy magazine was made and meet editors and things like that. And so it was a really fun experience, for being an internship. And had to transcribe interviews and set up interviews for the other reporters and research like events that were happening in town in the Latino community and like help put it on their calendar. So yeah, those were kind of, I guess, things I could think of that stick out.
Great. Thank you. And so then once you started your first full-time job, how did that change your career interests?
Yeah, so my very first full-time job was at this company called EC Hispanic Media, which is a leading bilingual advertising company. So while I was there, kind of gave me a taste of balancing marketing as well as editorial. So while I was there, I did everything from like marketing the events for the company. So we had different events like Dia de los Muertos events, quinceañera.com events, and, running the logistics for these events where, hundreds of people would come. So I would do the logistics for that with the events team and then also write copy sometimes for advertisements in Spanish, or I would have to review like other people's copy. And then I'd also write articles for the quinceañera.com magazine and kind of helped like grow their social media presence. So that was my very first job. And I did so many things, so also sometimes random things that I was asked to do by the CEO that were also kind of, fun for being a first job. Like one time she had a friend that came from Europe with her kids and they needed someone to like take them to Six Flags because they didn't know anyone. And so she's like, oh, you're a very social person. We'll pay for you and a guest to go to Six Flags. So I invited my brother. So like literally my one day of work was spent at Six Flags, like riding rides and kind of being the chaperone to these two kids that came from Europe. So that was, fun little things that Like, I guess not a lot of people get to do that for a first job. So definitely learned a lot about the Hispanic market and marketing with them, and also did some editorial. And so, yeah, that was like my first job that I did, first full-time job outside of college. And I was there for 2 years before I decided to, pursue media and journalism and go into that field.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That sounds like a really fun experience. And so, can you tell us about your networking experiences? Was that something that you learned on your own, or did you have anybody mentoring you?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of networking experiences, they have definitely been vital in attaining a lot of the, career opportunities that I've had throughout my life. So for me, networking in a way comes naturally because I'm a very social person. I just normally ask people what their names are and, what do they like to do for fun or where do they work. So in terms of the social aspect of like going up to somebody and starting to talk to them, that's very normal for me. In terms of, I guess, learning networking, I would say maybe my first experience I can think of came in college when I was part of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and they sponsored students to go to these big conferences. So I went to my first big conference in Chicago during the summer. I believe it was after my freshman year. And I would say that was probably like where I really learned how to hustle and network and like really kind of talk about yourself in an elevator pitch, because there were, booths and booths of tables of people from Bloomberg News to AP News and, local stations across the country. And you only have, not even maybe 5 minutes. You probably have like 1 to 2 minutes to talk to these recruiters and talk about yourself. And so you go from booth to booth to booth. And they encourage us to do that throughout the conference so we can get used to like talking to recruiters and talking to them about our resumes and things like that. So yeah, that was definitely a great experience for me because I learned how to do that, fairly young, after my first year of college. So yeah, networking's been really big. I would say in terms of professionally, one of the biggest networking kind of opportunities I could think of was probably like 5 to 6 years ago now. I always wanted to work for this publication called Me Too. We Are Me Too. It's one of the biggest Latinx publications for millennial and Gen Z readers. And, I would read their website and I felt like, oh, I would love to write for them. And I didn't, know how to really like reach out to anyone there. So one summer, I saw that the editor in chief at the time was going to be speaking at a conference. And the conference ticket was at the time, pricey. It was like $200. And, being like a young professional, I was like, ooh, that's a lot of money. But I was like, you know what? If I get a chance to meet this editor in chief and like land a contributing writer role, that's going to, obviously pay for itself. So I put it on my credit card and I drove out to the West Side, from where I was living in Los Angeles. And I spent like several days there for the conference, like waiting for this panel to finally, happen. And so I listened to the panel and then I made a beeline to the editor in chief after she was done. And after she was done talking to a few people, I was like, okay, I got to practice my pitch. Like, this is who I am. This is what I've done, and I did, I told her why I wanted to work at Me Too, what was my, journalism and editorial experience up to that point. Why did I feel my writing and my voice, would be good for the platform? And, she was like, yeah, I'd like to bring you in to do like an interview, send me your resume. Here's my card. So she's like, here's my card. Send your resume to me, send me clips that you've done, and then, we'll take it from there. And so I did that and, went through the process of, applying to be a freelance contributor, and I landed the job there. And so I worked for Me Too for like 5 or 6 years, and thankfully had so many awesome opportunities in my journalism career and really was able to build a name and a platform for myself by writing with Me Too. And that all came because of a networking opportunity that like I took the risk, again, like I said, being an out-of-state student, that was a huge risk for me at that time in my life. So, taking the risk of putting a conference ticket on my credit card and driving out and, making a pitch to an editor, that doesn't seem as scary when you've already moved across the country and done stuff like that. So yeah, I did that and it worked out for me. And so I always tell people, like, if you have someone that you look up to in your career or like a mentor that you want to meet, like, just try to see where they're going to be speaking at in terms of panels or, virtual conferences now, things like that, and try to, network with them, because it really can be a career changing opportunity.
Yes, I love that. Taking risk and making your own networking
Yes.
opportunity. Definitely something that we can all do a little more of, as scary as it may seem. So now tell me, what have been some of your most influential career experiences thus far?
Yeah. So I would say I'll try to break it down maybe into five mini ones to start out. So I would say my very first influential career opportunity would be working at Newsy.com. So that was like a full 360 for me in terms of being a college student, because I started out, like I said, when Newsy.com was, literally trying to form its team. It was a startup. We had founders that had come from AOL at the time. And at the time, I was in college in like the mid 2000s, like 2007 to 2011. So back then, hearing someone come from AOL, like that was huge back then. So we were like, okay, this is neat. We have like some really great, founders, and obviously they knew what they were doing, because now it's a it's a TV channel, seen across the country. So yeah, I started out as an intern, working for free, and I worked on the marketing team at that time as a sophomore. And I was actually one of the youngest interns, because I could not actually have an internship because I was an underclassman. And so the university didn't let us do an internship, but the founders of the company were like, we really like you and we like your energy. So we'll like sign paperwork so that you can come intern for us even as a sophomore. So I interned for them in the marketing department and learned like guerrilla marketing and tactics like that, to help spread the word of Newsy, and then worked my way up to around my junior year. I was writing scripts for the anchors and writing like the scripts that were used for the video news clips that were put on Newsy. And then by the time I was a senior, going into my final semester of my senior year, the founders of the company said, you've worked for us for a long time. We've seen your work and we really, believe that you could lead a team. So they're like, we want to hire you to do everything Newsy is doing, but do it in Spanish. So I helped launch this like beta test project called Newsy en Español. And I had to basically lead a team to do everything that Newsy was doing, editing, writing the scripts, learning metadata at that time for YouTube and putting our videos on YouTube. And we had an anchor that she would do all the videos in Spanish. And so I was leading this team at 21. Yeah, so 21, and leading a team of like 7 or 8 people, and, having this opportunity to launch something that had never been done before and show investors basically what Newsy could be in different languages. So that was a huge opportunity for me. And I still talk about it now when obviously, on this podcast. And even when I'm interviewed by people, I still talk about Newsy, because that's something that I'm very proud of. And to know that even that young, people saw, something in me to be a leader. So it's so important, I think, for employers to elevate talent, even if it's young. You never know what impact that can have on that person. So yeah, that's definitely a very formative experience for me. After that, I would say, probably becoming a writer for me too. Like I said, it's opened up so many doors for me. And I love that I got to really become in touch with my Latina side. My mom always jokes that watching all those telenovelas with my Mama Lupe and my Papa Poli growing up, definitely influenced that and how I wrote for Me Too. And I've gotten to interview celebrities like Diego Luna, some of the creators for Netflix shows. I actually went to Vancouver right before the pandemic. I was invited by Netflix to go to Vancouver and interview their talent on set from their different shows for Me Too. So that was my first like international press trip. So, things like that Me Too was able to give me. And every time I wrote an article, it was never work. It was so much fun, like doing the research, interviewing Latinos or Latinas across the country that were making a difference for their community, entrepreneurs, people in executive positions at different companies, or interviewing like makeup artists or fashion designers. It was just so awesome to bring those stories to Latinos, and, also ordinary things happening like gentrification on Calle Ocho, or, a series that I did with my editor on the cultural importance that Afro Latinx brought to Brazilian culture, things like that we got to explore that mainstream media wasn't talking about. So I would definitely say that was a career highlight, working with Me Too. When I got my first, I would say my first big break for, in media, I always say my first big break was like working for NBC Los Angeles. So I got hired around 25. Yeah, when I was 25, I got hired to be NBC Los Angeles's first social media producer that they ever had. And it was a year-long contract. And I loved it. Like, it was a year long, but I made friends and still keep in touch now with, my staff that I worked with. They were amazing. We had to cover some big stories that year, unfortunately, things from mass shootings all the way to like the Rio Olympics. It happened to be the year of the Rio Olympics. And I got to do things on social and digitally to help what's called the 100 days out, which is 100 days from where the Olympics happen. NBC Universal has a huge push on social media to get people excited for it. So I got to be part of that and just loved working with the team, NBC Los Angeles and Telemundo 52. And so we were all in one big newsroom and, had fun doing that. And from there, when my contract ended, I actually got recruited to go work for Univision in Miami. And so that's why I moved to Miami for 2 years. I was working with Univision and with Fusion TV. And that was a really big professional and personal life change professionally, because I got to work with one of my heroes, one of my career mentors that you asked me earlier. I got to work with Jorge Ramos and do social media for his show. I got to also meet Residente and do kind of copywriting for Big Papi Ortiz, the former MLB player. And got to do really fun stuff on the work side. And then also on the personal side, living in Miami was awesome. I made so many new best friends. I still talk to this day. I learned salsa dancing, Cuban style. I learned how to make cortadito, like coffee, so that was a big experience. And then I would say also a big career thing for me would be just kind of on the personal side. I did in the last year, check off that dream of owning my own business. And so I started a company called My Resume Squad, where I took the lessons and the training I learned at the University of Missouri Career Center, where I worked for 4 years, and, loved to interact with clients back then, loved hearing client stories when they would come back and tell me, hey, you're the reason I got into law school, or, I got that internship that you helped me edit my resume with. And so, took that training, and, when this global pandemic happened and unfortunately millions of people lost jobs, I actually had people in my network reach out to me and say, hey, I knew that you used to do this in college. My very first client, reached out to me and said, I know that you have experience in this. I just got laid off. Can you help me with my resume? I will pay you for your services. And so when that happened, I was like, wow, this can actually be a viable business. People need help. And I know with these skills how to review resumes and review CVs and help people with that. And especially with my editorial background, writing and editing comes so naturally to me. And so, yeah, I decided to launch my business. And I'm so happy to say, I've had clients since day one, and, people my clients have called me or emailed me saying like, I got the job, I got the interview, or I learned a whole new career path because of you, because of the career sessions we've had. So it's been such a fulfilling journey in terms of starting my own business and just seeing like, something that was a dream and then became an idea and then became a reality. Like it's still, still kicking. I celebrated my 1 year anniversary for my business in April. And so, I'm excited for what the next year is going to bring and what's going to happen even beyond that.
Congratulations. I'm going to
Thank
ask you
you.
more about that in a bit. But before we get there, can you tell us about some of the challenges you've have faced and how you overcome them?
Yeah, so I have definitely faced challenges in my career. And I would say one of the biggest things that has helped me is actually my parents, specifically my mom. She's my best friend, and I would call my parents for everything from encouragement to mentorship to advice. In college, when I was away, I would talk to my parents every day. I'd call them, for different reasons. For my dad, it was kind of more I needed the practical advice. Like I remember, I would say one of my early challenges, I guess, in my career is that when you're a student at the University of Missouri Journalism School, you have to pick which emphasis area you want to do. And I was, deciding, should I be a broadcast journalist? Should I be a multimedia journalist and do convergence journalism? Or, what track should I do? And I had a little bit of a, existential crisis because I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to decide what path I'm going to go on. How do I do this? And my heart was telling me to do multimedia journalism because I liked writing, I liked doing stuff digitally, my passion was there. But I was also really nervous about it because we definitely have some tough professors in that specific emphasis area. And it's known, there's this one class that was known to weed out people because it was really separated who really wanted to be a journalist and who kind of, didn't have the chops for it or didn't have the passion for it. So I was really nervous going into that class. And I remember I was like, oh, which one should I do? I don't know. Should I keep doing this? And I still remember my dad, called me on the phone, again, the practical one. And he was like, Jackie, in the 100 and something years since the Missouri School of Journalism started, he's like, I haven't heard any reports of anybody dying from the journalism school of how hard it is. So he's like, you can do this, pick an emphasis area. And he's like, everything's going to work out. And he's like, you'll be fine, just work hard, study, and that's all you can do. And so I was like, he's right. I can't let the fear of something keep me from, moving and doing something. So I remember I took a run down the Katy Trail in mid-Missouri and kind of got clarity and was like, yeah, I can do this. And so I signed up to do Convergence Journalism, did that course. That was super hard, reporting 4802. My friends and I still talk about it, that we were like, we survived, And what was cool is that class was so hard that all of us in the class, in that cohort, we became so close. We still talk to each other now. And our professor said, I purposely make it this difficult because I want to see who at the end is going to, like we said, be weeded out, who really wants to be, in multimedia journalism, and that this prepares you for those next courses. And so after that course, because you survive it, we became really close with our professor, and we even did pub crawls with her, our senior year. So it was really awesome how close we became. So that was a challenge, I would say, early on in my younger part of my career. I would say the next career challenge that I had was when I was editor-in-chief of Lossip. It was the job that I had right before I started working at NBC Los Angeles. And that was very challenging for me for a variety of reasons. Number one, I was a really young, editor-in-chief. I was 24 at the time when I got the job, and I had to lead people that were literally double my age, or people that were older than me by 10 years. And I was actually one of the youngest people on staff, but I was also at the same time editor-in-chief. And so that really taught me how to not let age define you. And as long as like you have a vision and you know how to clearly communicate it with your team and they believe in you, I didn't have people that were older like questioning me, So that definitely I had to, come into that type of power. You don't naturally walk in, or I don't know anyone that naturally walks in on day one. It's like, boom, I'm ready to lead. It's like you learn things. And I definitely stumbled a few times there and learned some big workplace things at that company. Unfortunately, that was kind of the first experience of a layoff I really had as a working professional. As hard as my team and I worked, sometimes things are financially out of your hands. You don't make the, financial budget decisions for a huge company. And so the company said, we understand how hard you've all worked and we appreciate your work, but financially, this website, it's not making sense for us and our audiences. So we're going to stick to like our more historical websites. And so, yeah, so they did lay off. So that was tough because, you have to be like, wow, I worked so hard at this and everything just kind of gets pulled under you with the rug. And again, my mom, always being the eternal optimist was like, don't worry, something's going to happen, something better is going to come. I still remember calling my parents crying and, both of them were like, something better is going to come. You just got to hit the ground running and work through it. And so every time there's some kind of setback, I've always had, something kind of there that comes along, after that. So after that, I actually got offers to start freelance writing. That's when I got my freelance job with Me Too, and I was able to work things out. I also got invited to apply to a position to be a full-time marketing manager, but the company, like, just I could tell it wasn't the right fit. But I also knew they needed someone to help complete the work. So I actually, in a way, learned how to negotiate because I said, you know what, I'm doing freelance work right now. I know this isn't the right company for me in terms of like long term, but I'm like, I also know you all need somebody like today. So I'm like, can I negotiate a freelance contract with all of you and work on your teams and what you need until you find a replacement? Because I knew that them looking for an employee was going to take a couple months. So I was like, I can offer my services now and we can part ways when you find somebody. And so they were like, wow, this is actually kind of interesting. We hadn't thought about that, but we do need the help. So they were like, yeah, let's do a freelance contract for the time being. So we did that. And it was like perfect timing because I was still looking for jobs. And so when they found somebody, it was perfect timing because I let them know that I got hired to go work at NBC Los Angeles. So, that was, what I did in between kind of those jobs. So that was definitely a challenge. Obviously being laid off, but then I learned how to like pick myself up and like keep hustling, keep working. So I always tell people like, don't be afraid of the hustle. Like eventually the universe is going to notice that you're putting in the hustle and putting in the work. And I truly believe that like the universe gives back what you put in. And so every time I have found myself at a professional crossroads or something, even with my own business, sometimes, of course you get a little bit of that entrepreneur worry, like, oh my gosh, am I going to have a client, the next week, next month, am I going to get new clients? And it's like, yeah, the work you put in, people hear about you, people refer you. And, thankfully I can say I've always had clients every single month since opening my business. So yeah, I'm definitely a believer in hard work and that hard work and having a positive outlook and like my parents say, believing that better things will come. If one door opens, open a window or kick down one of the doors so that you can open it, better things will come. So I let that, I tell that all the time when I do clubhouse talks or panels with people, or even my own clients, where if they're currently unemployed or, not looking for a new career transition, I always let them know if you do the work, if you, take freelance opportunities or work contract positions or take the time to learn new coursework, like all of that is eventually going to come back to you in a good form in one way or another.
Yeah, definitely. Always trying to take those risks and looking for those opportunities, because if you're not willing to keep your eyes open, nothing's going to show up. I love how you just created for
Thank
yourself, and
you.
having your parents as strong supports is so
Hmm.
important. And not everyone has that. So if you don't have that, find someone for yourself, or be that person for
Yes.
yourself if you're not able to find that. Now, tell us just your top three resume tips.
Yeah. So I would say definitely in terms of my top three resume tips, number one is always carefully look at the job description. That's definitely number one. It's like really read through the job description, have a notepad next to you, write down what are the duties that they're asking for, what are the job responsibilities they're asking for, and then see how your experience aligns with that. So, go down the list of like, okay, they're asking for this. Do I have experience doing that? Or have I done that before? Check, check, and that really helps write your resume. Also, really look through the job description, because I tell my clients sometimes some companies are sneaky and they want to see who's detail oriented. So they will put, sometimes I've seen it in the middle of a job description, or sometimes in fine print at the end, they will say, email your resume, or email your resume and cover letter to, XYZ person. And like they put that at the end of the job description or in the middle, because a lot of people are just clicking apply, 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 on these job search websites like LinkedIn or Indeed. And sometimes some jobs specifically want you to send an email with a cover letter sometimes, or just a resume to the specific person. And so I always tell my clients, read through the job descriptions, not only to see if you align with the job description in terms of the responsibilities and duties, but also because you might miss a line where it said to send specifically, samples or cover letter, to a specific person. So number one, read through the job description. Number two, modify your resume to the job that you're applying for. I absolutely understand that, applying to a job, it can be tiring, going through application after application, your eyes start to glaze over, and your words are like, oh my gosh, I'm looking at the same document, it can all start to jumble together. But I like to say, first, apply to the jobs that you want to apply to. So be intentional about the jobs that you want to apply to. Don't just apply to, the 20 job openings you see for business development manager. Like really see which companies do you want to work for, which, does their mission, values, work samples align with you. So really be intentional about your job search and modify your resume to what that job is asking for. So don't just mass send your resume to all these openings, like really modify your resume to that specific job role. And that's going to get you so much more traction. So that's the second tip, is to modify your resume to each job. And then third is look for different ways to highlight your experiences as a holistic job candidate. So a lot of people, they'll just put their professional work experience on a resume and that's kind of it. But I always tell clients, like, you also have experiences outside of your normal 9 to 5 job that could also be, making you a great candidate in the eyes of a recruiter. So put down volunteer experiences, certifications, if you're like CPR certified, or you're certified in certain courses, or you just completed coursework, on HubSpot or continuing education, like put those certifications on your resume as well in a special certification section. Or you can also add a section for honors and awards, like if you got a customer service award, or if you were awarded for, volunteer experience or something. Also, volunteer experience can be another section you put on your resume. So again, just to summarize, the top 3 tips. Number one is definitely read that job description, go through every line. Number two is modify your resume for that specific job role. Don't mass apply with the same resume. And then number three is to see what other sections you want to put on your resume beside your professional experience section.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are so great. And you actually reminded me of my episode 7, where it's about should I stop applying for jobs? And that's one of the biggest things that I talk about being intentional on the jobs that you're applying to, because you're just wasting all of your energy applying to, 20, 30 jobs a day, but not being intentional when you can do that intentionally, one or two a day, but really putting all of your energy to, and really, if you're going to put that much energy, you're going to pick the one that is best for you versus the 20 and you're just like, I hope somebody calls me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I absolutely agree with your number of applying to like 1 to 2 a day versus like 20, because your brain just gets in a fog. It's like tired, you might make a misspelling or something, So I also advise clients like 1 to 2 a day is good, look for something in the morning, maybe look for something in the afternoon. And also, it's okay to take a break if you need to, if you're burned out because you've been applying for several months, like take 1 to 2 weeks off, like, come back. Job postings are always going to be there, in terms of like new jobs coming in. I understand that, maybe you didn't apply to something and you come back and the job posting's gone, that definitely happens. But I always let people know if that happens and that wasn't the job meant for you, if it was meant for you, you'd apply and it would go your way, but if it's not meant for you, just trust that the universe knows what it's doing and, it closed for a reason, that application pool. So yeah, I definitely, encourage people to take, even if they need it, a whole month, off from job searching sometimes, just to like debrief, figure out, is this really the industry I want to go to? Maybe that month of you not applying, maybe instead use that time to, do some type of freelance work, or maybe take on some clients so that you can build up your skill set, or maybe use that time instead to like go take a course, get a certification, that you need for your job application. So I wouldn't say like completely take your foot off the gas pedal completely, where you're just like, all right, I'm going to take this month off and completely cruise. Like, still kind of do something productive, maybe read some books in the industry, or like really get up to date in the industry in terms of, articles or news releases, or take a new course, but maybe taking a month off or a couple weeks off from job application is kind of that breather that people need sometimes.
Thank you. Yes, all great tips. Was there anything else that you wanted to share with us?
So, I guess in terms of an additional tip that I would give anyone that's looking right now is, hopefully, as you've heard through my story, like networking is super important. And a lot of people, either don't put the time, or maybe they're not like naturally, super outgoing people. So networking can be a little bit daunting. So in that sense, take networking like virtually, write a little short email template that you can send out to a recruiter or a hiring manager that you're interested in, on LinkedIn, or try to do your homework and find their email address, and just be like, hey, I saw this job opening on LinkedIn. I'm really interested because of ABC, and I would like to know if this job is still open. And a lot of times, kind of opening that door with like, hey, I'm interested. This is why. Is the job still open? If the job is still open, that hiring manager will say, yeah, it's still open. Send me your resume so you can apply. I've kind of advised that tip to a lot of people, and I've seen it work for people. I've seen it work for myself as well. So yeah, definitely networking in terms of virtually, like sending emails. Also, like I said, attend conferences with people or in industries that you want to go into. So yeah, I mean, don't undermine the power of networking. It really can open the door to a new opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you for that. And now, how can they reach you, Jacqueline?
Yeah, so I can definitely be reached on my Instagram. That's kind of where I give a lot of my tips for resumes, cover letters, things like that. And my handle is My Resume Squad. So that's the name of my business, My Resume Squad. And so they can find me on Instagram, and they can also click on my Instagram link in bio to schedule a free 15-minute consultation where I help people, figure out where are they currently on their career search or career journey. How can my services help them, launch that next career move. I'm also on TikTok, same thing, My Resume Squad. On TikTok, it's My Resume Squad _career tips. And then if they just want to say hi or, take a look at some of the services I offer, it's myresumesquad.com. And there's, drop down menu. You can see my services. I offer resume reviews and writing and editing, also LinkedIn optimizations. And I also help people with career coaching. And that's actually starting to become like my second most popular service after resume and, CV writing and editing. It's career coaching to help people, figure out what they want in their next career move. If they're currently in a job or field and they feel like they want to make, a switch into something else, I definitely help a lot of people with transitional career coaching.
Great. Thank you so much. And I will make sure to have all the links in the show notes.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here, Norma. And I look forward to continuing to hear all of your podcasts. And thank you for giving, working professionals like me a platform to talk about our stories and, share tips with your audience.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening to the Manifest Your Career podcast with me, your host, Dr. Norma Reyes, a Latina career and life coach.